With his famous flip phone on fire with calls, Axios is reporting today that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is privately telling donors that he is open to dumping President Biden. Quote, Schumer has been listening to donors' ideas and suggestions about the best way forward for the party, according to three people familiar with the matter. NBC News has reached out to the majority leader. His office declines to comment on the report. He did, however, release this statement. As I have made clear repeatedly, publicly and privately, I support President Biden and remain committed to ensuring Donald Trump is defeated in November. For Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, the two top Democrats in Congress, what they ultimately decide isn't just being watched by the White House and the party. It will be judged by history. Joining us now, former Democratic Senator Barbara Boxer, who worked closely with the president during their shared time in the Senate. Also with us, presidential historian Douglas Brinkley. So, Senator, I think you were in Congress for, 25, 26 years. You know a lot of the players still. What does leadership need to be doing right now, both in terms of communicating to the members, to the caucus, and also to the White House?
Leadership is doing what they have to do. They're telling everyone they're with President Biden because they know, as we all know, he is the one who will make this decision. And all of this breathless reporting and piling on. And I hope, I don't mean you, and I'm just saying by the media, by the elites, by people who want 5 minutes of fame by going to the microphones. All of this is only helping Donald Trump. This is an election like no other. Everyone knows the stakes. Only Joe Biden can make this decision. Look, 2 weeks ago, I said, I'm going to watch him for 2 weeks to see if what happened in debate happens again. It is not. I see the Joe Biden I have known for years. Is he a little softer spoken? Yes. Does he make a couple of more gaffes? Yes. But I'll conclude with this. Joe has never been slick. He's never been smooth. He's not like Robert Redford in The Candidate. He's not like, actors who play presidents. He is who he is, a fighter for the middle class, the greatest record on jobs in history versus a guy who is the only one since records have been kept who left office with fewer jobs than when he came in. So there you are.
So I think you're probably talking to, a lot of your Democratic friends. And I look, for example, at Peter Welch from Vermont, who said, listen, my state loves Joe Biden. They gave him a bigger margin of victory than anyone else. But he said he saved us from Donald Trump once. He wants to do it again. But the question is whether he is the best candidate to do that. And in my view, he is not. I think for a lot of the people who have come out, they're not necessarily looking, are they, for their 15 minutes of fame? They're looking at what they think the threat is of Donald Trump and who is the best person. Can reasonable people disagree about that, Senator?
Yes, but I was there, as you point out, 10 years in the House, more than 20 in the Senate. As an individual, you go to the leadership. You don't go to the microphone. Look, the last 2 weeks, we've seen Joe out there. We've also seen the stock market up, inflation down, jobs are up, more people getting health care. And we've seen Donald Trump, who continues to think that the media is the enemy of the people, that hangs around and loves Putin. And I'll tell you something, the press ought to be paying a little bit of attention to this guy who rambles on about sharks in the water and batteries sinking ships, and you have to jump overboard and you'll get eaten, by a shark. He's losing it. But when he has it, it's a danger. He says he wants to be a dictator on day one. He wants to take away a woman's right to choose and punish her. So the breathless press focuses on every single syllable out of Joe Biden's mouth. He's never been smooth. We all know that. And yet lets this guy get away with it. Oh, who's he going to pick for vice president? Well, how about he can't pick Mike Pence, who was his vice president, because Mike Pence was almost killed in the insurrection and he's not supporting Trump. How about that as a story?
Well, I will say we've played lots of Donald Trump on this program, but I want to ask you, Doug, look, this process is going to play out. And you know, there's going to be a big press conference tonight, and NATO leaders are going to go home. We remember back in the Nixon days when members of Congress made the pilgrimage to the White House to tell the president to hang things up because of his dire prospects. We should not draw a direct comparison there. One was a criminal enterprise. The other questions are about aging, right? So, but talk a little bit about if history informs us in any way about how senators and members of Congress in general can and should be handling this situation, which is fraught, emotional, and incredibly consequential.
I don't think any serious Democrat would use the language of dumping of Joe Biden. He's a beloved figure, and any serious person, columnist, is going to say that somewhere in their piece. The question is, what was the damage of those 90 minutes? Why did he tell that George Stephanopoulos that he never replayed the debate tape? Any athlete who fumbles 50 times should see what went wrong. And he flat out says, I don't need to look at it. And then I think people are saying, why not take a cognitive test and use it as a learning moment for Americans? All Americans at 80 should probably do a cognitive test. It takes very little time. Do it and put it out there. But I see the drip, and I agree with Senator Boxer. He is the nominee of the Democratic Party. Only Joe Biden could decide to drop out. But I think if he could get on top of the health issue, talk about it in a forthright way, instead of there's a feel that there's been a bit of a cover-up about it over the past 2 years. You mentioned what happened in Watergate and Nixon, and that was, that's when Barry Goldwater and others went to Nixon and said, you lied to us. You're gone. We won't support your action anymore. And it was a death knell to Nixon, who was mired in a scandal. Joe Biden's not in any scandal. It's a question of, can he serve for 4 more years? And you pick the state of Vermont. Bernie Sanders is wildly behind Joe Biden, and Senator Welch isn't. And that's an honest, in my mind, disagreement. But they better get on the same page soon. And I think the Biden administration needs to promote Kamala Harris more and more, be seen with her, talk about her. We're a team, because it's odd for her to have to be dodging around an Essence Festival or going to an event and constantly looking like, not wanting to seem like she wants Biden's job. They should be a unifying force. And I think if it's not Biden, for some reason he decides to pull out, it has to be Kamala Harris, who would be the go-to person for all the obvious reasons. And if he did have to quit, Biden could write a letter to the country and saying, I've done my best, I've done well, I did take a cognitive test, I was surprised by the result, but you have the first woman in American history in Kamala Harris. That scenario could happen, but right now Biden's dug in, and I don't know who's going to get him to say, I'm not running. It would take a team of like 15 Democratic senators to look him in the eyes, Goldwater-like, and say, we will not back you. I think, and something like that's plausible, but everybody now seems to be hedging their bets.
So let me ask you, as somebody who has run more than a few campaigns, Senator, the widespread reporting is that what Senate Democrats were asking for today and what members of the House have asked for is data, right? If you're the campaign and you want to go and you want to convince us that Joe Biden can win this, and this is really about defeating, every one of them will tell you, Donald Trump. What's their best option for defeating Donald Trump? That means data on polling. That means data on fundraising. Can you address that? And can you, at this stage of the game, look dispassionately at data? And that really does help you to make a decision. Or are we in this 15-minute, frankly, situation where, people's attention span's very short and you have no way of knowing what it's going to be a month or 2 months down the road?
Look, I'm not an expert on data, but I dealt with it. You're right. Every time I ran, and just for the record, I ran for Senate 4 times, and 3 times the data showed I would never do it. I could never make it. So that's important. And I will say this. I've looked at the polls. They're still very close. And after 2 weeks of nonstop piling on by the press and individual members of Congress. I think the grassroots, frankly, is going to rise up in this case because they do love Joe. If Joe decides to stay in, and he has decided to stay in, what's hurting us and what could make the data bad is if we're not on the same page. Doug Brinkley is absolutely right. Everyone has to work together. Look at France. Everyone predicted, the press, the elite media, oh, the right wing is taking over, the right wing is taking over. It didn't happen. Why? Because everyone on the other side of it unified. And I believe that when you look at the threat of Donald Trump and this whole new 2025 project, which really was written by 80% of their staff comes from Trump. This is his thing. The first thing is end no-fault divorce, punish women, take away everybody's rights, fire all the federal employees and put in your cronies and go after, your enemies, just like Putin did with Navalny and now Mrs. Navalny. This is a serious moment. Yes, I will look at the data, but for goodness sakes, I agree with the great historian you have on now. We need to unite and be smart. And it has to start now. That's what I think.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.